Welcome to the Family Legacy Podcast, a podcast that goes beyond legal jargon and gets to the root of how to ensure your past, present, and future are protected. This episode is brought to you by the Rutkowski Law Firm, Michigan's leading asset protection, estate planning, Medicaid, and elder law firm. And here's our host, Michael Rutkowski. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. As always, Carrie, love Tuesdays.
Tuesdays. What a great
Tuesday.
day.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
fall is in full
We're
swing.
there. We're there. Last week it was 75. This week it's like 40. So we're leaves are changing faster than they want to now. I was kind of wondering if it was going to happen. Then all of a sudden it just like overnight, bam, it's cold.
What's one of your favorite things about fall? Like when it's the end of summer, like what are you're like, oh, fall is just around the corner and you're most looking
Yeah.
forward to?
Yeah. I would say two things: hooded sweatshirts and baggy comfy clothes, and the cider mills with the kids. It's so good. Like we're in Michigan, it's just like a big thing. Everyone goes to the cider mills on the weekends. Donuts, apple cider, the whole thing. It's amazing. We're doing like haunted hay rides and stuff at the cider mills, and all the kids are doing all the things, pumpkin patches, you name it. It's like a
Oh,
big Michigan thing.
I miss those days. When we lived in Seattle, we would do that every year. Our friends, we
Okay.
had like a group friend chat, and somebody inevitably would at some point message and say, time for Bob's. And we would go to um, Bob's farm and they have all the cider stuff going on. They have the
Yeah.
corn mazes, but
Yeah.
the kids' all-time favorite thing was that they have a slide, or like it's like a series of slides next to each other in the barn with the hay barrels.
Sure.
So you go like
Yeah.
you get a potato sack and
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah,
whoosh.
totally. Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's funny. Like we've traveled to other places. Brother-in-law lives in Colorado, so we've been out there for a couple of falls, and they try to like make it the same. They'll like put pumpkins just in a dirt field, not actually growing. I love it. Yeah, Michigan. I think you're Seattle, Michigan, over to like Maine. It's just incredible color changes and
So
so good.
pretty.
Yeah,
So
so pretty.
good.
So we're
And
just
the
digging all the fall vibes right now, the chili, the whole thing. It's football. It's good. It's good.
So good. So good. Speaking of fall, there's the Monday holidays sort of pop up, and this week we're looking at Veterans Day.
Yeah.
Hats off to all of our veterans. Thank you
Yeah.
for
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for all of your service. Appreciate you.
absolutely. Well, we support veterans through estate planning and Medicaid. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why veterans would need Medicaid and then how uh estate planning supports that?
Yeah, great question. So we do a lot of work with our veterans, and there's a couple. What we find is that a lot of times they don't know the benefits that they're entitled to, and they also don't know that those benefits can extend to their family members. So it's so often someone might come into us for general estate planning. We find out they're a veteran, and then we talk to them about things like Veterans Aid and Attendance pension. And can that apply to them or their kids or their spouse? Like, what does that all look like? And so I think that's just a big thing, is just knowing what's available to you out there. A lot of the rules, we've talked on this podcast before about Medicaid and how that works, and a lot of the rules are the same, but essentially, to me, the Veterans Aid and Attendance pension benefit, it's just great. And you can, a question we get a lot is, can you get both? And the answer to that is yes. So maybe should we dive into what are the differences between the two? Do you think that's a good start?
Yeah, I mean, let's assume as much as we'd love to assume that everybody listens to our show every week, we hope that you
Yeah.
do. But in case you don't, we want to make sure we're covering off for folks who may not have been along for the journey. So yes, I think we definitely need to talk about Medicaid as it relates to estate planning and then the
Sure.
difference between that and the pension.
Yeah, perfect. So, in estate planning, a lot of times people are thinking about, who's going to get my stuff when I pass away. But you also, through our elder law practice, we get a lot of families qualified for governmental benefits to help them cover the cost of long-term care. Right now in the state of Michigan, the average cost of long-term care. So when we say long-term care, we're thinking like 24/7 care. This isn't mom needs help like 2 hours a week doing something. It's much greater than that, but it's when expenses can get up to that $10,000 to $15,000 a month. There's governmental benefits available to people through Medicaid, which is a state and federally funded program that can help cover the cost of long-term care so that you don't have to pay all of that out of pocket. It covers actually most of it. And then there's also Veterans Aid and Attendance Pension. And two very different benefits, but both help with the cost of long-term care. Big difference is Medicaid is kind of paid out like health insurance, where it just pays the providers directly for the services that you need. Where Veterans Aid and Attendance Pension is more like a pension, where if you qualify, it will cut you a check in your name that you can use for whatever you need it for. So a lot of times we're helping families get this aid and attendance pension for assisted living type situations or some in-home care. It's a beautiful thing that you can qualify for. Now, with both Veterans Aid and Attendance Pension and Medicaid, they both have, let's call it like a test in order to qualify. They're both a means-based test, meaning they're going to look at your assets and income to see if you qualify. But it all starts with, are you physically disabled to the point where you need this type of benefit? Okay, so we always start there, because if we don't get past that, it doesn't matter how good we are at restructuring someone's assets, using asset protection trusts. We could pull out all the stops. It doesn't matter. If you're not to the point yet where you need that level of care, we're not ready yet. So what we first look at is a couple things. We look at activities of daily living. So if you struggle with 3 out of the 7 activities of daily living, and those are things like being able to get in and out of bed, walk around, use the restroom, bathe yourself. These are your activities of daily living. And if you have difficulty with 3 of them, you check the box to being physically disabled to the point where you need this care. Another way to think about it generally is, do I need round-the-clock care? Do I need someone around all the time to be helping? If you're there, then you're probably ready for this type of care. Does that make sense, Carrie?
It does. And is that pertain just to you as the individual, or if you're living with somebody who's having this trouble, can you vouch for them, or does it have to
Yeah,
come from the person?
great question. So we're always looking at the person who needs the care. So they determine whether if they're eligible for the benefit or not. And so that gets determined by some type of licensed professional, whether it's a doctor, whether it's a social worker. Someone usually will evaluate that person to see, are we physically disabled to the point where we need that care? Because when we go to apply, we're going to need some documentation to support the need.
And do
Does that?
you help? Yeah, and do you help them apply, or do they need to apply and then estate planning is sort of an add-on?
Great question. So we absolutely help families apply. The application process is complicated. And a lot of families their applications get rejected. They might qualify physically, their assets and income look good, but it's just a very complicated, complex application. So we are absolutely doing those for families all the time.
What makes it complex? Is it just need to check the right boxes? Is it just a
Yeah,
lot of paperwork? I mean, what's
I
hard
wish
about it?
I wish it was like as simple as it's just hard to find where you need to write your name, but it's not. What it really is they require a lot of proof and documentation to support what you need. So yes, filling out your legal name and address and all that's easy enough, but there's something in both of the benefits. Medicaid has a 5-year look back, and aid and attendance has a 3-year look back. What they're going to want with the application is all the supporting documentation of your financial history, along with your current financial situation, along with all the doctor's notes and letters that support the need. So there's just a lot that goes into it. And what we find is that when families try to tackle this themselves, the application typically gets rejected. And that's pricey. I mean, if you're talking about 10 to 15,000 per month, and it takes you a couple months to do it correctly, you could be looking at $30,000 to $45,000 that was just wasted.
Oh, gosh, that sounds so
Yeah, it's a
painful.
lot, and it happens
Yeah.
fast.
3-year look back, does that mean you have to have been going through this for 3 years before you can qualify?
No, yeah, that's a great question. So the look back for both Medicaid and VA, what that is you provide all your financial history for the past 3 to 5 years. And they're going to go through there to see if there was any gifting of assets that they don't like. Let's just say 2 years ago, you generously paid off your granddaughter's college tuition. Okay. What Medicaid or VA is going to say is you should have used that money for your care.
Mm.
And so we don't like the gift that you did. So now we're not going to pay your care for X amount of months. There's this complicated equation that you figure out. But essentially, if there was gifting of assets that they don't like, or there's something they don't approve of in your financial history of the past 5 years, they're going to issue what's called a penalty period, which is a time in which you should qualify on paper, but they're not going to pay because you gave away $20,000 2 years ago. Does that make
Oh,
sense?
yes, that's so painful. This
So that
wonderful,
comes,
lovely thing you did years ago, it's coming
yeah,
back to
yeah.
them.
And who would have known? Who would have
No,
known?
of
And
course.
so this is why when working with the families, we're looking through their history to see if we can fix it before we submit the application so that there's no problem with the look back period. Because this is where we run into people getting the idea that Medicaid or VA can take your house or they can take your stuff. They can't take anything from you, but what we see happen the most is that someone gifted away some money that they can't get back. Here's a scenario that happens at least once a year. A family does all this Google research and figures out how to get qualified. And so mom and dad, they give away all their stuff to their kids. And then you know what the kids do? Well, the daughter puts in a pool, the son buys that awesome truck that he always wanted, and the other paid down their mortgage. So there's no way to get that gift back. And so mom and dad, thinking that they're ready to go on Medicaid, get a rejection letter saying that that gift was inappropriate, but they have no money to cover their costs, but Medicaid's saying we're not covering your costs. So now what happens? Now they have to sell an asset that they otherwise wouldn't have. They have to sell their
Oh,
home that was exempt from all of this to pay for that period in which Medicaid says, well, we're not paying. So who's going
yeah.
to, does that make sense? So
Yeah.
they can't take your stuff. No one can take your assets, but improper planning can put you in a spot that you might have to sell an asset that was otherwise exempt.
Oh gosh, it's crazy that that happens too. Let's talk about, we talked about Medicaid, we talked about Veterans Aid. You said something early on about having both.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
you have both?
You can have both. And a lot of times what it looks like, okay, so let's start with what's the difference in qualification for the two? So Medicaid is a means-based test available to anyone. So as long as you're physically disabled and your assets are under the allowable amount, you can qualify. Okay. With VA aid and attendance, one very key component to all this is you have to have served at least one day during wartime. So I'm looking here at my screen just to go through the dates. It's World War II, the Korean conflict, Vietnam, the Gulf War. And the Gulf War is continuing. So if you serve during any of those times, you then at least one day of service, and it doesn't need to be overseas. I hear a lot of people say, is it like a boots on the ground standard? And it's not. You could have been helping during that time here on US soil. Totally fine. But you have to have served at least one day. If you haven't, then unfortunately you cannot qualify for this benefit. Does that make sense? So
Yes, that does make sense. And
you
that's
have
an
you
important
have to have it.
distinction. Yeah. I imagine that, so for the Veterans Aid and Attendance Pension, is there an age I mean, the wars you mentioned are
It
kind of
makes
dating
you,
us back a bit. So is
yeah,
there an
it
age?
makes you, qualify. I mean, essentially, for an age standard, as long as you serve during any of those times, you qualify. Um, Back to your original question when you asked how do they play together, a lot of times what we see is families will utilize the Veterans Aid and Attendance Pension as the need for care starts to creep up. So as they need maybe some in-home care or assisted living, they're really leaning on the VA aid and attendance pension. Then as soon as it becomes more skilled care or nursing home care, 24/7 type of care, that's when we're leaning more on Medicaid to cover all of our costs. Because the VA aid and attendance pension kind of caps out at about $3,000 a month. So once we start exceeding that, that's where we're looking to Medicaid to cover the difference. But you can have both at the same time. But at the end of the day, our goal is to get all of your long-term care covered by whatever governmental benefits you qualify for. That's a lot.
Got it. Does it
Cover-
depend? Yeah. Is it like order of operations? Would you try and kick in the pension first before you kicked
Yes.
in Medicaid?
Yes, because we can get someone the aid and attendance pension. With Medicaid, you have to be in a skilled care facility. There's only a couple programs for Medicaid, and typically you have to be in skilled care, where you don't for VA aid and attendance pension.
Got it. So how do
You-
people get started? They're like, "Hey, I think I qualify for one or both of these things."
Yeah,
They're ready to
having
go.
these, great question. Having these conversations early on is key. So many families come to us when all of a sudden they need total 24/7 care. They're spending money faster than they know what to do with it. Where really, if there's any signs of a decline in your health, you should start having the conversations, because you want to do a lot of things. You want to see what kind of plan you can put in place to cover the cost of long-term care, so you're not spending $15,000 per month. But what you also want to know is, in your area, what places accept Medicaid? Okay. What does my financial history look like? Do I have a clean financial history ready to go when I need it? Being prepared for all of this could be huge for the family. Meeting with some of the facilities that accept Medicaid, so that you know where your loved one's going to end up, so that you're not in a scramble to do this when health all of a sudden takes a dive for the worse, and now we have 3 days to find a place for mom or dad.
And the wait lists are long.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
a
my
great.
grandmother was on a wait list for 2 years before she was able to get into a facility, and so she was living with my dad
So I wish
at
I
that
would have known.
time.
I wish I would have known you at the time. So working with an elder law firm will typically bump you up the list, and here's why: because the facilities know that they're going to get paid. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
When we work with a family, we're going to do the application. We're going to get the asset structured the right way. So you got to remember, a skilled care facility at the end of the day is a business. They know that they're going to get paid if you're working with us, because we're going to do the application right. We're going to get the asset structured the right way. And on an ongoing basis, you will continue to be eligible for the Medicaid benefit, where often when families are trying it themselves, it could take 3 to 4 months to get approved. Then every time you do the recertification, things go wrong there, and now the skilled facility is not getting paid. Work with your
That's good to
local
know.
law attorney or us.
Yes. Good to know. Very important. And I love what you're saying too about planning ahead. Like, even if you're not in these situations yet, or you don't qualify yet, working to sort of get your ducks in a row for the off chance that you might. I mean, if you are a veteran, you just don't qualify age wise yet, then, getting your ducks in a row now means once you do qualify, that'll come in a lot faster, it sounds like. And then from a Medicaid standpoint, it's just making sure everything's clean and done well and properly, so that if you do qualify for Medicaid, or you can qualify for Medicaid, you don't get hit with those time frames for those gifts you shouldn't have kept on giving. So
For
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
And
really
you
important.
might be sitting there listening to this and be like, well, my aunt was in a Medicaid facility and it was absolutely terrible. It was like a 1980s nursing home. And the reality of that is, and that's why Medicaid gets such a bad rap, is that there's good facilities and bad facilities. You can private pay for a terrible facility. So most places, I'd say at least 80% of all places accept the Medicaid long-term care benefit. You got to know the places that are good, the places that are not so good. That's why also working with an elder law attorney is incredibly important. We have relationships in the community to know where are the great places where we can get you in at. We have social workers that are constantly evaluating all the Medicaid facilities in our area. It's incredibly helpful. Families, let alone the planning that we do for a family, just the resources that we have in the community are incredible.
Her story. Leah's wonderful. She's out there. She is making
Yeah,
sure that yeah, yeah, I think that's built keeping those relationships alive the way that you guys do is just really wonderful.
yeah.
Um, I think that's great. Any last tips for folks who are considering either of these from a veteran's perspective?
Meet with your local VA also to know, what facilities are in your area because there are VA hospitals, there's VA nursing homes. I think just doing all this planning in advance can be very helpful for the family because this can be very stressful when it always is very stressful and emotional when a loved one's health declines. And so having all of these conversations in advance can just bring so much peace of mind.
Last question for you, Michael, that just sort of popped in my head is for because I love how you talk about it as a family. So if you have I think I'm answering my own question as I'm asking it, but just to confirm, if you had been in war as a veteran and your wife's health declines, does she qualify for any of this because you were
Yes.
involved?
Yes. Yes. Spouse, dependents, they all are entitled to some form of benefit, and it doesn't matter if the person who served is still living or not. Just know this, it kind of tiers down as so the person who served has the ability to get the most benefit from there. And let's just use round numbers. Let's just say it's 3,000 for the person a month for the person who served. Maybe it's 2,500 for the spouse of the person who served, and then dependents call it 2,000. I'm making those numbers up, but you get the idea of, there's a lot of factors that go into what you qualify for, but that's just kind of how it works. But yes, so many people don't know that a spouse qualifies as well, so does dependents.
So I learned so much. I love these. I love these. If you need help, if you are a veteran or a spouse of a veteran and you feel like you might qualify or potentially qualify in the future, please reach out. We would love to help you. Um,
Don't forget about our veterans discount.
oh, say more on that while I pull up
Well,
my
maybe
notes.
you got to call to find out what it is, but it's well worth the
Oh,
call. It's well worth the call.
dropping the seeds. I like it. If you found this episode helpful and you would like to see if you qualify for Medicaid or the Veterans Pension, please, please, please call us at 248-955-2842. Again, that's 248-955-2842, or you can email us at mlr@rutkowskilawfirm.com. mlr@rutkowskilawfirm.com. Michael, before we go, we got 7 days before we hang out again. What are you most looking forward to?
Oh, great question. Family wedding this Friday. I can't wait. Brother-in-law is going to be in with all of his daughters from Colorado, and we're heading up north to do Michigan fall things. Chili, football, apple orchards, everything we talked about in the beginning. We're doing it.
I love it. I want pictures. I want
Yeah.
pictures.
Oh, we'll post some.
I can't wait. Thank you all again for listening. If you'd like, again, if you liked this episode, please like, subscribe, and share. And if you'd like help with your estate planning or asset protection needs, please call us at 248-955-2842. Again, that's 248-955-2842. Thank you again, Michael. What a joy. I
My
appreciate you.
pleasure. See you next week.